AITA for having my husband out of the delivery room when he brought his mother instead of mine. This happened a few weeks ago. When I delivered my son, we had an agreement before that my husband would be by my side during the delivery. When the moment comes, I suddenly had a change of mind and started to miss my mother desperately, as if I would never see her again. I knew she had lessons that day, but wanted her by my side, so I asked my husband to call and drive her here. When my husband came back maybe an hour later, he came back with his mother, not mine. He explained that my mother was in the middle of a lecture and he was afraid that they could not make it in time before she sums it up, so he drove his own mother who lived near her instead. I got angry and started wailing uncontrollably, crying for my mother like a child. The nurses ended up removing him, and I had no family beside me during the whole unpleasant process. I continued to cry even after seeing my son and only stopped when my mother finally arrived much later. According to her, my husband did not call her, instead left her a message, and she only saw it after dismissal. Now thinking back, that was extremely embarrassing, and I had no idea how I lost it like that. I feel sorry that he was not able to witness the process because of my last minute change of mind. It was supposed to be just me and him, and he expressed his disappointment too. However, I'm also angry that he did not bother to make an effort to let me see my mother when I felt I needed her, and instead took this chance to bring his own mother. I guess both of us feel betrayed to some extent, but which one of us is the R? I want to know. NTA, you were in labor and under a lot of stress. It sounds like he did the bare minimum to try to reach your mom. Also, you didn't directly make him leave. The nurse did for the sake of your stress levels, which was reasonable. At that point, assuming there was now no longer time for him to go back for your mom and return in time. Having your husband there would only make your stress levels worse because you were upset. Also, you didn't directly make him leave. The nurse did for the sake of your stress levels, which was reasonable. Imagine being the nurse in that moment. The patient asked her husband to get her mom. He comes back with his mom and the patient is obviously distressed. All I'd think is you had one job while throwing the guy out. I speak from experience. It's just another day at the office as the nurse. It's not uncommon at all to be put in the middle of a family drama, and I would do the same as that nurse did for Opus. Do what's best for the patient and kick out whoever is making them feel worse. I have no problem being the bad guy when it comes to advocating for the patient. I would probably forget about it within 24 hours because family shit always comes to a head when people are hospitalized and under stress. It's just common. AITA, I also try to make situations like this my fault instead of the patient. I will tell the unwanted visitor I'm removing them. Not that the patient is. Let them be mad at me instead, cause I'll never see them again. NTA, I was ready to say NR or even YTA if he had made an honest effort to reach your mom, and being unable to get her had brought his own mom as the only source of support he could gather. But the thing is, he didn't do that. Even then, she didn't want his mother. He should have properly tried calling her, and maybe she could get someone else in if she was the one doing the lecture. Yeah. I feel like, sorry guys, my daughter is in labor. I'll upload a little video lecture your course site later today. Would be a perfectly reasonable thing for a professor to say / do. NTA, hun. You were in labor. Of course your feelings are gonna be amplified. I would reacted the same as you if my husband brought his mom instead of mine. Also, congratulations on your newborn. Oh my god, you're so right. Labor amplifies your feelings like crazy. After I had my daughter, the nurse brought me a sandwich and handed it to my husband. He accidentally thought it was for him and started eating it. I started crying when I saw him do that, and I couldn't stop. Now, after a 13-hour, I was pretty hungry, but still, lol, he thought the sandwich was for him. Info. Did your mother not know you were in labor several hours earlier and place herself on standby in case she was needed? She could have taken the day off from teaching. Thank you. Everyone is ignoring the fact that her mother made herself unavailable knowing her daughter was, at the very least, due to go into labor soon. Our local hospitals are only allowing one guest in the building at a time, so she would have just been sitting for an unpredictable amount of hours waiting for her turn to come in. I think it's reasonable to go to work knowing the wife had already picked the husband to go in. NTA, your husband is though, yeah, because Miller's a great substitute for a lady. who is asking for her mother, going into childbirth. It's not like she needs the woman who raised her over the person who gained title mother by law to be there. /s. Not to mention, who would want their mill to see their privates? She would probably want to see the baby coming out. Yeah. This is a really weird situation. Why would Op's husband even think bringing his own mother would be a good idea? Nah, you. For obvious reasons. I can't help but feel for your husband a little bit. In that situation, he was excited as well. He would have been looking forward to supporting you and being with you through this process. When you changed your mind last minute and asked for your mum, I imagine he felt a little deflated and useless. Maybe like he's insufficient. He shouldn't have brought his mother, but he wouldn't have been thinking clearly. I would cut him some slack and move past this and enjoy your newborn. Congrats to you both. Yana, this was way too far down. Jesus Christ. I feel for the woman giving birth, but throwing a curveball like that will possibly make the husband miss the birth of his child, while also not be there for his wife isn't a simple task or decision like everyone makes it out to be. And even if he would have called it, possibly won't have worked. Of course he wasn't thinking 100% and didn't do as much as he could, but everyone is assuming malicious intent when it doesn't seem like there is any. Just a mess up. JFC, everyone seems ready to call for a divorce like in Askrelation or Hip Advis or some shit. Info, you said he left her a message, which seems like he would have to call to do that. Now it sounds like he tried and didn't know what to do in terms of him picking what he perhaps thought was the next best thing. Then you were upset and panicked, and so it's not your fault he was removed. You were also overwhelmed by the moment. Not to assume, but I think she meant a text message. I thought he left a message with a school, which she may not get until later. I think your husband was a bit panicked and made a judgment call when he couldn't reach your mother. He brought you a mother, just not the one you requested. I guess he didn't want to come back empty-handed. There Anna, you are justified in wanting your mum when you were in pain and feeling scared. He's not her though. He was probably quite worried and stressed street the time. He didn't think things through clearly, and he made a choice that ultimately upset you, and as a result was not present for the birth. Is that not enough? Do you need the internet to assign asshole to someone? There's a lot of missing info here, and I'm surprised and saddened that people are so willing to deem Op's husband and are without it. According to /Op's mother, my husband did not call her, instead left her a message. This is contradictory. Which is it? Did he leave her a message, which means he called, or did he not? Is it possible that he tried to reach your mother, couldn't, then went with what he thought was the next best option? When my husband came back maybe an hour later, he came back with his mother, not mine. Your husband's mother was closer, and it still took him an hour to bring her to the hospital? How far away was your mother? Was she far enough that, if he went and got her, he could have missed the birth of his child, and you would have had no one there with you to support you through it? My mother was in the middle of a lecture. Is this true? If so, would it have been possible/feasible for your husband to burst into the room during lecture unannounced, since they didn't talk by phone? Tell her to end her it immediately, then drive her back to the hospital without her getting in trouble or losing her job? When my husband came back, are you sure he actually left at all? Do you know for certain that he didn't just call his mother and she was the one who answered and was able to drive herself to the hospital? Full disclosure, I'm an expectant father in the US, where I live. Once I get to the hospital, because of the pandemic, I'm not allowed to leave. If I do, they won't let me back in. Are there similar rules where you live? There's also a very strict limit to what people are allowed into the hospital to be with you. Were both of your mothers on this list? As it stands with how you've laid out the situation, both you and your husband did things in a high stress moment that, in hindsight, you regret. That would make me lean towards a light ESH/NAH. Worth nothing more than apologies to each other, but the answers to these questions could sway that. I agree. People are being pretty hard on the husband when I imagine he was also stressed and panicking. It's not a situation where either party is going to be thinking straight. I think this is just an unfortunate and awkward situation that can be resolved by talking it out, apologizing, and moving on. It sounds to me as if he couldn't get hold of your mum. Panicked and brought his own mum in the hope that was better than nothing. But it's hard to tell without knowing how he explained it to you. You should try and forgive each other though. It seems that he genuinely wanted to support you. Now left her a message, which implies he called her, or at least that's how phones work. If I know you're in a lecture and I try to call you, then you're in a lecture. Then on to plan B. What exactly else could he have done? Go drag her out of her lecture? Which she must have known before the start of the lecture that Op was going into labor, or the very least should have known to keep the phone close in case this very thing happens. She didn't catch the call or the message, other than him grabbing his own mother, a person he thought would help. Something. Nothing. How is this husband's fault? NTA. D. And you both need to remember that while he was undoubtedly worried about you and feeling helpless, you were also, as well as in enormous amounts of pain. You were the patient until that baby is born. Your needs come first. His needs need to take a backseat. It sounds like you and he need to have a very honest conversation about trust and support. Otherwise you're potentially setting off down a path of not being able to trust him to put your and the baby's needs first. Because he'll always be running to his mummy. Been there. Done that. It took me far too long to have the honest conversation. We came a hair's breadth away from divorce, and the relationship with my pills is irrevocably damaged. After reading a lot of people's comments, I think the issue a lot of people have is he should never leave the hospital in this situation if she doesn't have another person there who's authorized to make decisions. Birth can take a rapid turn and put both the mother and baby's life in danger. There is a lot of additional information missing beyond that. For now, he made a well-intentioned attempt to get you what you wanted. He left to go get your mom. Many would have stayed. He messaged her because honestly, that's what everyone does. Phone calls are weird and your mom has job which leaves her unavailable for calls. And when he didn't get a response back, he tried to find a substitute, and he managed to return in time to offer his support. You both wound up paying dearly for your freak out. So I'd honestly drop this. The only thing I can see going differently if he had called would be a Reddit post ranting about how your mother missed your labor because she had her phone on silent. Right. I can't believe the amount of people calling him the a-hole. Her mom was giving a lecture and couldn't accept phone calls. How is that his fault? He didn't want her to be alone, so grabbed his mom for support, and somehow he gets the shitty end of the stick. If I were him, I would be pissed. He is the father of the child and you are basically telling him you don't want him in the room to witness the birth of your child. You want mommy instead. She really needs to drop thus and enjoy her new baby. But she didn't. The nurse kicked him out due to her stress levels. I'm a surrogate, and when I gave birth the last time, the mom was my birthing coach and the dad was a support. He fell asleep and then asked me to stop breathing so loud. You can bet the nurse kicked him out real quick because I went from calm to oh duck no, what did you just say? Women change their minds about birth plans all the time because they have no idea what they will want in such a high endorphins area. You were under stress and decided you wanted your mom. But why would you send your husband to go get her if you still wanted someone with you in the delivery room? Surely your mother could have driven, or you, but after your husband got in contact with her. I've been through labor and I totally get it. When you get close to transition you lose your friggin' mind. But at the same time, sending your husband away to pick up your mom during the peak of pain is pretty insane. If you wanted someone to be with you for the birth of your child, your husband may not be the smartest person for bringing your mill, but he's certainly not an like everyone here wants to paint him out to be. My husband felt completely lost and powerless when I was in labor, and probably would have made a stupid stressed decision too. But it's not like he maliciously brought his mother instead of yours. Just made a stupid decision under stress. The only person here who may be the R is your mom. Did you tell her you were in labor? I'm assuming she knew, since early labor can be hours. If this is your first child, it's borderline inconsiderate that she didn't make herself more available considering she's been through labor before and knows what it's like. I honestly think the only fair move here is for you both to recognize you messed up, apologize, and move on. Who really cares who was wrong when the end result was a precious little one? Info, was it a text message or a voice message? So my wife is 37 weeks pregnant with our first. We are getting things for the labor. I don't know what to think about this situation. I would 100% understand if she needs her mother during labor, but the thought of not witnessing the born of my son would really hurt me, would weigh on me a bit every time anyone asks about labor. Softish. I thought about but I think everyone is owed an apology here. Rather than that, everyone should move on. Sometimes, our behavior can be understandable during circumstances, but that doesn't mean the behavior wasn't hurtful or irrational. I firmly believe in acting with grace and acting in good faith towards the people you care about. You were in labor, which is obviously a difficult moment. Reacting wildly out of character during labor happens sometimes, and someone can't fault you for the behavior in the moment. Afterwards, however, you can look back and realize your behavior could have been really hurtful to your husband. He is your life partner, the father of your baby, and it's a special moment for him too, that you didn't want him to see, and due to circumstances, he didn't. I do think you should look back on that and, while realizing you're allowed some leeway there, understand that this was a difficult moment for your husband, that you escalated in behavior that, while understandable, wasn't entirely fair. I think recognizing that and apologizing to your husband, in other words, acting in good faith, understanding his side, and not getting caught up in wanting to be right, would be not only kind, but do a lot towards managing his emotional response. Likewise, your husband owes you an apology as well. I understand his behavior, too. He wasn't the one in labor, but fathers can, and often do become emotionally compromised, panicky, and not entirely rational or logical during birth. He might not be going through what you were going through, but it was a big moment too, and the woman he loved was obviously in distress and pain. He didn't call your mother, which he should have. But if we are realistic, we all know her phone was probably on silent during a lecture, and she wouldn't have called him back until after dismissal anyway. In his panic state, he did what made sense and made fair effort. Understanding that your mother would take a while, he did what he thought might be the next best thing and call his own mother. He didn't know why you suddenly wanted something different, but he couldn't give it to you, and he tried finding an alternative. Like you, he should recognize his behavior is understandable in light of the circumstances, but that upon looking back, an apology might be warranted. He shouldn't get caught up in being right either, and should recognize that his efforts were not exactly above and beyond, and that he can and should apologize for that. Beautifully said. This is the mature, responsible, caring about the person you are planning to spend the rest of your life with answer. Parenting is hard, staring it with bad feelings, because you're trying to be right instead of doing right by the relationship, as well as setting yourselves up for a really hard time in the long term. Both Op and her husband are hurting. Both are going to have feelings of resentment. If my wife had decided she wanted her mom instead of me, remember, COVID, at the birth of my son, that would have been absolutely crushing. Focus on healing, so that you can parent. You have a long road ahead of you. Don't let this be the negative start to it. Now, if he is telling the truth, your husband tried his best to do right by you, and you unfairly punished him. If he is lying, and his mother is a manipulative then kick husband to the curb. The only person who can decide whether or not your husband has pure intentions is you. It's like the scrubbing as cat of childbirth. Honestly, the wife was a major asshole. She robbed a father of his chance to witness his child being born. Because she was hysterical, she broke away from the agreed upon plan, just because she randomly requested that her mother, who was teaching a uni class hours away, should be there. She wanted the father to go fetch her and potentially miss the birth of his child, which he did. Eventually, it seems to me that Op's mother may have miscommunicated what the husband did to reach her. She said that the husband left a message, which is something you can do only if you call the person. If I was the husband, this would be a big red flag. Now, he didn't know how to handle it when he messaged your mom and she didn't get back. You were in the middle of an emotional and hormonal experience. I think you both did fine in making time pressured decisions that you'd never had to deal with before. I'm sure your mom was upset that he did not interrupt her, but I would also be unsure of how to handle it. How did Op do fine in the middle of an emotional and hormonal experience? It seems like she panicked and changed the plan at the last second based on her emotions. Then threw a fit over everything not going according to her new demands. And then held her husband's actions during that time against him, preventing him from witnessing the birth of his child. And even now she's still angry at him over it. So in what way was how she handled the situation fine? I'll start off by saying, hormones and pain are not a scot-free excuse for being an asshole to this level. Downvote all you want. AITA, I'm sorry, but that's the father of your child. If you have a loving relationship, what you did to him was wrong. He will never get that chance back to be there for the birth of his child, especially if it was your first. I'm not going to get into the whole mother side of the argument, except to say this. When you agree to marriage, your partner becomes the most important person of support in your life. He will still be there long after your mother is gone. He will be there long after your kids grow up and leave. Wanting your mom by your side during birth is fine, but to want her there more than the father, if it's a decision you'll think about and possible regret for the rest of your life, that should tell you the magnitude. Your husband will always remember missing the birth of his son. Also, can neither mother drive her own self? And why wasn't Op's mom there from the beginning when labor started? Before lecture? NTA. My mom is my best friend, and when I need her, and she listens. Vice versa. My mill is not a substitute for my mom, and never will be. I would be absolutely livid. That was supposed to be special, and he could been more considerate of you. I understand his worrying, but you were having a whole ass baby. He should gotten over it and gotten your mom. If she was so super close to her mother, why didn't she plan to have her mother be there to begin with? He was thrown a curveball and given no grace. It's as simple as calling her mom and saying her daughter is in labor and wants her there. If that call didn't work, he should have called the school and have them send a message to her that her daughter is labor and wants her there. He didn't even do half that. He sent a text and went and picked up his mom, which the majority of women would feel uncomfortable about. The last thing you should do as a husband when your wife is spread open and crying for her mom for comfort is grab your mom and parade her into watch. Now I feel like you are allowed to go crazy while giving birth. My wife tried to leave. I don't want to do this anymore. I want to go home. Pretty sure going home isn't gonna stop this, honey. My dad didn't want to go into the delivery room, so my mum told him fine. I won't go either. Apostrophe. Please click subscribe if you enjoyed this video.